and say welcome for February's office hours. I want to let you know that it is an insanely busy time. I'm sure everyone is feeling that same thing. And therefore, Helen is actually committed at another meeting right now. So you'll just have me for this afternoon. A reminder that we are recording this and it will be on our YouTube channel in just a couple of days. So, without further ado, I want to let you know the couple of topics that we're going to be touching on today, based on questions that we've received recently. We're going to talk about whether or not objectives are required on progress reports. For ETR meetings, who are the required members, and can an individual, particularly a related service provider, serve in a dual role? We're going to talk about the next steps when parents are not in agreement with a change of placement. And then we're going to talk a little bit about parent invitation for the IEP and whether that signature is required, and what you're supposed to do for documenting that you shared the John Peterson and Autism Scholarship information. So the first question is, and we've been asked this multiple times. I'm sure we have probably addressed it at some point over the last few years in previous office hours, but we'll definitely are happy to share it again. The question is whether or not it is a requirement that on the progress reports that there is data for the objectives, or is it okay just to be the goals? And the short and sweet answer for that is the requirement is that for students with significant cognitive or multiple disabilities, so our kiddos with more complex needs, you are required to report on the objectives each time progress reports are issued. And so if your district does interim reports, that would mean you would have to have data on those interims as well. This is not required for other students with disabilities. So students who are a little higher functioning, you do not have to report on the objectives themselves. However, one thing that we do want to point out is even though you don't have to necessarily report on those during the progress report, you do still have to be taking data on them. If something required objectives, then there's a reason that you broke that task down into objectives, and you do need to collect data on it. Also, remember that at any point in time, a parent has the right to request to see the data available for their students' progress, and you have to be able to produce that. So, and again, of course, you have to keep a sampling of data for, anywhere between 3 and 5 years, whatever your LEA's policy is. But that's an important thing to clarify, that yes, you may not have to actually report on it, but that doesn't mean that you don't have to take data on it and have that data available, and that that data should be being utilized to inform your instructional decisions and monitor how the student is doing. Our second question stems from asking if, in particular, for an ETR, if one of the related service providers, perhaps like a speech language therapist, could serve in dual roles, could serve as the intervention specialist, or in some cases, someone might be serving as the district representative. So, a couple of things to think about. For an initial ETR, there is no requirement for an intervention specialist, since that's the first time that the students being identified. They've obviously not been receiving special education services, so you don't have to have an IS at an initial meeting. But at subsequent meetings, then of course you do. If the student's only SDI is being provided by a speech pathologist or an OT or a PT, then that person is serving in lieu of an intervention specialist, and you wouldn't need to have one in that case, because they, just like on the IEP in section 7, they move up to the SDI spot, and they are taking the place of an intervention specialist. And the same would be true at that ETR meeting. But having said that, even if the primary minutes are delivered by the SLP or the OT, if any of those minutes are addressed by an IS, then you definitely should have the IS at the meeting. All right. The next question is when a team has come to the decision that there needs to be a change of placement for a student. So obviously things are not going well where the student is, the team's met, you've been through, all of the things that you do in that process to determine what's going to meet the student's needs. And everyone has landed on, there needs to be a change of placement. What happens when the parent doesn't agree? Sort of what's the next step? What do you do in that case? And you know, the there's not an easy answer for that. That's a situation that's very difficult and challenging because again, options are limited. You can't do a change of placement. You can't make that move without a parent's signature, without their agreement. So, the best thing that we can suggest is that you reconvene, explore the concerns that the family has, consider other options to see if you can get everybody on the same page. Look at what are the barriers to the student being successful where they currently are, and sort of see if you can make some adjustments, alterations, some compromises between maybe what the parent wants and what the district wants to do, again, see if you can come to some kind of agreement. Other than that, the only thing that we would suggest is, seek mediation. You might involve, an advocate or a parent mentor. You may seek mediation from the department. And if none of that is successful, then the district has the option to pursue due process against the parent. But bear in mind that, when you do that, you have to engage in stay put while you're going through that due process. So you would then immediately engage stay put while that plays out. All right. Our next question asks if an official parent invitation for the IEP has to be sent out, and is it required to get a signature back? And it is not required to get a signature back, but yes, you absolutely have to send the invitation. And this is a great time for us to also remind you that if a child is going to be turning 14 during the life of that IEP, they are required to have an invite too. And if you are going to be completing a transition section for a child younger than 14, they have to be invited. So, what we always suggest is put the student's name first and then the parent name. That way you ensure that you don't forget. But for our transition age students, they are required to be invited. And the reason that you're doing that formal invitation is that is one of your pieces of evidence. That's one of the things that is looked for when we're determining whether something was compliant or not. You might not get it back signed, but you still have the record that that invitation was sent. So, and just like we're showing here on the screen, that is an important piece of evidence that accompanies your documentation of attempts when you don't have parent participation and you don't get a signature. Those are those things that you're going to show that you did your due diligence to do that, to get those. All right. And I think our final question is we all know the requirement that we share the John Peterson and Autism Scholarship info um, annually with families. Typically, you do that during the IEP meeting. Is there some form or a document that it should be used, and do you have to get a signature from a parent for that? And the answer is that no, there isn't. Someone asked if, that's covered in the parents' rights booklet. Um, and whether it's touched on there or not, use it's still a good idea for you to show as a district, as an LEA, that you provided that information. What we see many LEAs do is on the very front cover of the IEP, in that other section, they just type a little line there with a place to put a check mark that says, shared information regarding JPSN and autism scholarship, or even if it's an initial IEP, that the initial eye exam requirement information was shared, and then just check it off right on that front cover. And of course, you're also going to say that in the PRO1, that information was shared. So don't need a separate form. That's a great way to handle that. And you don't have to have a signature from a parent. Okay, well, I am going to pause in my talking just to check in and see if there are any questions about anything that we talked about. We didn't have a whole lot of topics today. We're right in the midst of indicator season, and we know that everybody, including ourselves, is insanely busy with that. So we kind of expected it to be a little bit quieter today. But certainly, if you would like to unmute or pop in the chat any questions you may have, we'll try to address those. Okay, and I do see we have one question about a separate invitation or add the name of the student on the parent page. That's a great question. You do not have to have a separate one. It's fine to put the student name. One of the tricks that I always told staff was put the student's name first. That way you don't forget. You don't forget to invite them. But yeah, you don't have to have one to the student and one to the parent. It's fine to combine them. The one thing that I would say is, when in situations where you have um, parents who maybe attend and participate, but they don't live together, send those separately. And certainly, if the student is not living with the parent, but the parent, is a required member of the IEP team and will be participating or needs to be invited, then definitely send those, separately. But if they're together, then it's fine to put both of their names on the same invitation. Okay. Well, I don't see any other questions. So I am going to say thank you so much for joining us in February. Like I said, totally recognize that this is a very hectic and busy, sort of stressful time of year for all of us. So we appreciate you taking time to be here with us today. We will certainly have this posted up on our YouTube channel here shortly, and everyone have a great rest of your afternoon, rest of February, and let's all cross our fingers for spring to arrive soon. So thank you, everyone. Take care.